If love were easy, it wouldn't show up uninvited at your wedding. That was the thought stuck in my head the exact second the doors at the back of the chapel creaked open, and every instinct in my body told me something was about to go very, very wrong. But 6 hours earlier, everything had felt controlled, planned down to the minute, down to the exact shade of ivory on my suit, and the way my tie sat perfectly centered against my collar. I stood in front of the mirror in a quiet hotel suite 12 floors above the city, sunlight cutting through the glass like a spotlight I didn't ask for. And I remember staring at my reflection thinking this is what moving on looks like, right? Clean lines, steady breathing. A future that makes sense. Michael had texted me then, just 3 words, "I'm proud of us." And I typed back a heart because that was what you did when things were good, when things were safe, when nothing hurt anymore. Except something did, something small and sharp, like a splinter buried too deep to reach. I ignored it. Of course I did. I had a schedule to keep, a wedding to attend, my own, guests arriving from out of state, family filling rows of polished wooden pews, a string quartet tuning softly in the background like everything was part of some perfectly rehearsed performance. And I was the lead who just needed to hit his marks, smile on cue, say the right words at the right time. But then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, no name, no context. Just one sentence that made my stomach drop like I'd missed a step on a staircase. Don't marry him. I stared at it longer than I should have, thumb hovering, heart doing something uneven in my chest. And for a second, just a second, a face flashed through my mind. Messy hair, tired eyes, a voice that always sounded like it knew me better than I knew myself. I locked my phone, shoved it into my jacket pocket, and said out loud, "No." Because that part of my life was over, it had to be. You don't build something new by staring at what broke you. You don't walk down an aisle thinking about the one who never showed up when it mattered. So I left the room, stepped into the hallway, into the elevator, into the version of my life that made sense on paper. Michael was waiting at the end of it, calm, composed, his hand warm and steady when he took mine before the ceremony. "You okay?" he asked, and I nodded. Because that's what you do when everything is almost perfect. You say yes, you say you're fine, you say you're ready. Even when there's a voice in the back of your mind whispering that something unfinished doesn't stay buried forever, it waits. It watches, and sometimes, it walks back into your life at the exact moment you think you've finally moved on. "You can still walk away," my best friend whispered right before the doors opened, his voice low, careful, like he was handing me an exit I had not realized I needed. And for a split second my chest tightened because the idea of walking away felt both terrifying and strangely relieving. But then the music started, soft piano spilling into the air, and everything moved forward whether I was ready or not. I stepped into the aisle, every eye turning toward me, rows of familiar faces blurring together under warm golden lights, the scent of fresh flowers thick in the room. And at the end of it all stood Michael, perfectly still, perfectly composed, his suit sharp, his expression calm. Like this moment was exactly where he was meant to be, and I told myself that was enough. That stability was enough. That love did not always have to feel like a storm. Sometimes it could be quiet, predictable, safe. My shoes echoed softly against the floor as I walked. Each step measured, each breath controlled. But that splinter inside me shifted again. Sharper now, harder to ignore. I reached Michael, his hand closing around mine. Warm, grounding. "You look incredible," he murmured, and I forced a smile, because he deserved that much, because he had never given me a reason to doubt him, because this was the life I chose, the one that made sense. The officiant began speaking, words about commitment and future and building something lasting, and I nodded along like I was already living inside those promises. But then, just as I was starting to settle into it, just as the world narrowed down to this moment, this choice, this future, the doors behind us opened. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet shift, but it cut through everything, a subtle disruption that made my heart stutter, and I do not know why I turned. I should not have. I should have stayed focused, stayed present. But something pulled me, something undeniable, and when I looked, everything inside me stopped. Because there he was, standing at the back like he had stepped out of a memory I had spent years trying to bury, Adrian. The one person I had trained myself not to think about, not to miss, not to want. And yet there he was, real, breathing, closer than he had any right to be. His eyes locked on mine like no time had passed at all, like he had not disappeared without a word, like he had not left me standing alone with questions that never got answers. My fingers tightened unconsciously around Michael's hand, but I barely felt it, barely felt anything except the sudden rush of everything I thought I had buried. The room seemed to tilt, the sound fading into something distant and hollow, and all I could see was him, taking one step forward, then another, moving through the rows like nothing could stop him, like he had already decided how this would end, and my breath caught, sharp and uneven, because some part of me, the part one never admitted out loud, the part one locked away, had always wondered what I would do if he ever came back, and now he was here, walking toward me, right in the middle of the life I had built without him. No, I whispered under my breath, but it did not sound like a refusal. It sounded like disbelief, like my mind was trying to catch up with something my heart had already recognized. Adrian kept walking, slow, steady, every step deliberate, like he was crossing a distance that had never really gone away. Conversations around us faded into a low hum. The officiant stopped speaking mid-sentence, guests shifting in their seats, confusion spreading in quiet waves, but none of it mattered, not when. He was 10 feet away, not when his eyes never left mine, not when everything I had tried to forget came rushing back all at once. The late nights, the unfinished conversations, the way he used to look at me like I was something worth choosing without hesitation, and then the silence that followed when he did not. My chest tightened, breath uneven, because this was not supposed to happen. Not today, not here. Michael's hand tightened around mine. Firmer now, grounding, or maybe holding on. I could not tell. Do you know him? He asked quietly, his voice controlled but edged with something sharper underneath. I swallowed, but no words came out. Because how do you explain a person who was once your entire world in a single sentence? Adrian stopped just a few feet away, close enough now that I could see the details I had memorized without realizing it. The faint crease between his brows, the way his jaw tightened when he was holding something back, the way his breathing was just slightly uneven like he had run to get here. And maybe he had. Maybe he had crossed more than just distance to stand here in front of me now. Noah, he said, my name leaving his mouth like it had always belonged there, and something inside me cracked. Soft, but undeniable. I had heard that name 1,000 times before, but never like this, never with this weight, this urgency, like it carried everything he never said before. Michael stepped slightly forward beside me, his presence solid, protective. This is not the time, he said, polite but firm, the kind of tone that usually ended conversations before they began. But Adrian did not look at him, did not even acknowledge him. His focus locked entirely on me, like nothing else in the room existed, like the world had narrowed down to just this moment, just this question hanging unspoken between us. And for a second I hated that, hated how easily he could still do that, still pull me into his gravity without even trying. My fingers trembled slightly, betraying me, because part of me wanted to look away, to shut this down, to protect the life I had built, but another part, quieter but stronger, refused to move, refused to pretend this did not matter. Adrian took one more step. Closer, close enough now that the air between us felt charged, like something fragile and volatile all at once. His voice dropped, softer this time, but somehow louder than anything else in the room. I did not leave you, he said, and the words landed heavy, wrong, impossible, because that was not how I remembered it. That was not how it felt when he disappeared without a trace, when every call went unanswered, when every explanation I deserved never came. My heart pounded harder, confusion twisting with something dangerously close to hope, and I hated that too. Hated how even now, even after everything, one sentence from him could unravel me this easily. Michael's grip tightened again, grounding, steady, real, and I forced myself to breathe, to stay present, to remember where I was, who I was standing beside. But Adrian's eyes did not waver, not for a second, and then he said it, the question that split everything open. Do you still love me? And just like that, the world stopped waiting for my answer. The question hung in the air like something fragile that could shatter everything if I touched it wrong. And for a second I forgot how to breathe, forgot how to stand, forgot that there were people watching, waiting, judging, because all I could hear was the echo of his voice and the way it wrapped around something deep inside me that I had spent years trying to lock away. My lips parted, but no sound came out. Not yet. Not when every version of my past and present collided at once. Memories. Cutting in sharp flashes. Adrian laughing in a dim apartment with takeout containers scattered across the floor. Adrian pulling me closer on a cold night like I was the only warmth he needed. Adrian walking away without turning back, leaving me with silence so loud it drowned everything else. My chest tightened painfully. Because how do you answer a question like that when the truth is not simple, when it never stopped being complicated? Michael shifted beside me, his presence steady, real, his hand still wrapped around mine like an anchor, and I felt it then. The weight of everything I had chosen, the life I was about to step into, the promises I was seconds away from making. Noah, Michael said quietly, his voice calm but firm. You do not have to engage with this. And I knew he was giving me an out, a clean way to shut this down, to protect us, to protect what we had built together, and part of me wanted to take it, wanted to nod, to turn away, to pretend Adrian was just a mistake that had shown up too late. But my body did not move, my eyes stayed locked on Adrian, because he had not looked away, not once, like he was waiting, like he had come all this way just for this moment, just for my answer. Say something, he added softly, and there was no pressure in his tone, just something raw, something honest, something that made it harder to ignore him than anything else. My throat felt tight, like the words were stuck somewhere between what I should say and what I actually felt. You left, I finally said, my voice quieter than I expected, but it cut through the silence anyway, because it was the truth I had held on to for so long. The one thing that made moving on possible. Adrian flinched, barely, but I saw it. The way his expression shifted like the weight of that accusation hit exactly where it hurt. I know what it looked like, he said, and there was something different in his voice now, something heavier, like he was carrying more than just regret. But I did not choose that. My heart stuttered, confusion flickering through me, because that did not make sense, because nothing about the way he disappeared ever made sense, and I hated that even now, even standing here, I wanted to believe him. Michael's grip tightened again, grounding me, pulling me back into the present, into reality, into the life I had built without Adrian. This is not fair, Michael said, his voice sharper now, directed at Adrian. You do not get to walk in here and rewrite history. And for the first time Adrian looked at him, really looked at him, not with anger, not with hostility, but with something calm and unshaken, like he had already accepted whatever came next. I am not here to rewrite anything, Adrian said evenly. Then his gaze returned to me, steady, unwavering. I am here because he deserves the truth, and my heart slammed against my ribs at that word, truth. Because if there was one thing I had never gotten from him, it was that, and now he was offering it, here, in the worst possible moment. The moment where everything was already on the line, where one answer could change everything. The room felt too small, the air too thin, and I realized then that this was not just about the past, not just about what we were, but about what I was about to become, the choice I was making right now, in front of everyone, including myself, and my voice trembled slightly as I said, then say it. Because if he was going to break this moment, if he was going to stand here and ask me that question, then I needed to know, needed to hear whatever it was that had kept him away all this time, even if it changed everything. Adrian did not answer right away, and that silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, like the entire room was holding its breath with me, waiting to see if whatever he said next would fix everything or ruin it completely. His eyes stayed on mine, searching, steady, but there was something behind them now, something raw, something I had never seen before, not even when we were at our worst. And it made my chest tighten in a way I was not prepared for. The night I left, he finally said, his voice low, controlled, but not empty, never empty. I did not choose to disappear. My pulse spiked, confusion flickering sharper now, because that was not how it felt. That was not how it looked when every call went unanswered, when every message stayed unread, when I stood in the same spot for hours waiting for something that never came. Then what happened? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them, because if he was going to stand here and say this, then I needed more than half-truths. I needed something real. Adrian exhaled slowly, Like even saying it out loud cost him something. Like he had replayed this moment in his head 100 times and still did not know how to get it right. I got a call that night, he said, and the memory hit me instantly. That night, the last one. The one where everything had felt fragile, but still fixable. The one where I thought we would talk, fix it, choose each other again. About my family, he continued. Something happened, and I had to leave immediately. No time, no warning. I frowned, because that still did not explain the silence that followed, the days that turned into weeks, the absence that felt like abandonment. That does not explain why you never came back, I said, my voice sharper now, because this was the part that mattered, the part that broke everything. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly, and for the first time, I saw something crack through his composure, something like regret, or maybe something deeper. I tried, he said, and there was no hesitation in it, no uncertainty, just truth that felt too solid to dismiss. But I could not reach you. My heart stumbled, because that did not make sense, because I had been there, always there, waiting, hoping, hurting. I changed my number, I said automatically, the memory surfacing like something I had buried on purpose, because every call from him that never came had felt like proof that he chose not to return. Adrian nodded once, like he had expected that answer, like he had already lived through this version of the conversation in his head. And when I came back, he added, softer now, you were gone. Something inside me shifted, small but undeniable, because I remembered that too. The moment I stopped waiting, the moment I decided I had to move on because staying felt like slowly disappearing. And suddenly the timeline I had built in my head, the one where he left and never looked back, did not feel as solid as it used to. Michael's hand tightened around mine again, pulling me back, grounding me in the present, in the life that had nothing to do with unfinished stories and missed chances. This is still not okay, Michael said, his voice controlled but firm. Whatever happened, you do not get to come back like this and expect him to just forget everything. Adrian did not argue, did not push back. He just looked at me, like the rest of the world did not matter, like only my reaction did. I am not asking him to forget, he said quietly. I am asking him to know the truth before he decides his future. And that word hit harder than anything else, future, because that was exactly what this was about. Not just what happened before, but what I was about to choose now, standing here between two versions of my life. One that made sense, and one that never stopped meaning something. And my heart pounded louder as I realized that no matter what I said next, nothing would ever be simple again. You deserve the truth, Adrian said. Again, quieter this time, like he was not trying to convince anyone else in the room, only me. And that made it harder to ignore, harder to dismiss, because the way he said it did not feel like manipulation. It felt like something unfinished finally reaching the surface. My heart would not slow down, each beat loud and uneven in my chest, because the version of the past I had held on to for so long was starting to crack, and I did not know what to do with that. I had built my healing on the belief that he chose to leave, that he did not come back, that I was the only one who stayed. And now he was standing in front of me telling me that story was not complete, that there was something I never saw, something I never knew. And I hated how much that mattered. I hated how my fingers loosened slightly in Michael's hand without me meaning to, like my body was reacting before my mind could catch up. Michael noticed, of course he did. His grip shifted, firmer now, not painful but grounding, reminding me where I was, reminding me who I had chosen. Noah, he said, softer this time, not sharp, not defensive, just real. Look at me. And I did, because I had to. Because this was not just about the past anymore. This was about the man standing beside me. The one who had been there, who had shown up, who had never made me question whether I mattered. His eyes were steady, calm in a way that made everything else feel chaotic. You do not owe him anything, he continued. And there was no anger in it, just certainty, just quiet strength, the kind that had made me say yes in the first place. And for a moment, that felt enough. It almost grounded me completely. Almost pulled me back into the version of my life that was simple and stable and safe. But then Adrian spoke again, and everything shifted. I am not asking for anything, he said, his voice steady but lower now, like every word carried weight. I just need you to know that I never stopped. My breath caught, sharp and sudden, because that sentence landed somewhere deep, somewhere I had spent years trying to ignore, The idea that maybe, just maybe, I had not been the only one holding on. My chest tightened painfully, because if that was true, then everything I told myself to survive was incomplete. That is not fair, I said, but my voice was not as strong as I wanted it to be, because fairness had nothing to do with this moment, nothing to do with standing between two people who represented two completely different versions of love, one built on consistency and trust, the other on something messier, something unfinished, something that never really let go. Adrian's expression softened slightly, not victorious, not relieved, just honest, like he understood exactly what this was doing to me and hated it just as much. I know, he said quietly, but neither is pretending this does not matter. And that was the problem, because it did matter, more than I wanted it to, more than I had ever admitted out loud. The room felt too quiet now, too focused, like every single person was waiting for me to decide how this story ended. But I did not feel ready. I did not feel certain. I felt like I was standing in the middle of something I had not fully understood until this exact moment. My thoughts tangled, my emotions pulling in opposite directions. And for the first time since this started, I realized something terrifying. This was not about choosing between right and wrong. This was about choosing between what made sense and what felt real. And I did not know which one I was strong enough to live with. Then why now? The question left my mouth before I could stop it, sharper than I intended, but I did not take it back, because if Adrian had carried this truth for so long, if he had known all of this while I was building a life without him, then this moment mattered more than anything else. His expression shifted slightly, not defensive, not surprised, just tired, like this was the part he had been dreading. Because I only found you again 2 weeks ago, he said, and that landed differently, not explosive. Not dramatic, just heavy, like something that settled deep instead of hitting all at once. My brows furrowed, confusion tightening in my chest again, because that did not make sense, not with everything we had shared, not with how easily I had found pieces of him even after he was gone. You expect me to believe that? I asked, and my voice wavered despite myself, because I did not know if I wanted it to be true or not. Adrian did not argue, did not push. He just nodded once, like he understood exactly how impossible that sounded. I went back to your old place, he said, his voice quieter now, like each word was something he had rehearsed but still struggled to say out loud. Your job, your friends, everything I could think of, but you had already moved on, and I did not know where to look next. Something inside me twisted, because I remembered that phase too. The way I had erased pieces of my life just to survive the absence he left behind. The way I had told myself starting over was the only way to stop hurting. And now he was standing here telling me that those same choices had made me impossible to find. The irony of it sat heavy in my chest. And when I finally did, Adrian continued, his gaze steady on mine. I found out you were getting married. The words echoed in my head, slower than they should have. Like my mind was trying to process them in pieces instead of all at once. My stomach tightened, because that meant this was not impulsive, not reckless, not some dramatic interruption driven by ego or regret. This was calculated, deliberate, something he had chosen even knowing exactly what it would cost. So you thought this was the right moment? Michael's voice cut in, calm but edged now, no longer neutral, no longer just observing, and I felt the shift immediately. The tension tightening between them in a way that made the air feel thinner. Adrian glanced at him briefly, not dismissive, but not engaged either, like this was not about him, like it never had been. No, Adrian said simply, then looked back at me. I just knew it was the last one. And that sentence hit harder than anything else he had said so far, because it stripped everything down to something painfully simple. This was not about timing or fairness or even right and wrong. This was about a final chance, a moment that would not come again. My chest rose and fell unevenly, my thoughts scrambling to keep up with everything shifting inside me, because I could feel it now, the weight of the decision pressing in from all sides. Not just the choice between two people, but the choice between closing a door forever or opening it one last time to see what was behind it. Michael's hand shifted in mine, not pulling, not forcing, just there, steady, present, real, and I felt the contrast sharply, because Adrian stood in front of me representing everything uncertain, everything unresolved, everything that still had the power to hurt, and yet somehow still mattered. "Noah," Michael said again, softer this time. And when I looked at him, there was no anger, no desperation, just quiet honesty. "You do not have to figure everything out right now." But that was the problem, because I did. The entire room was waiting. The moment was already here, and no matter how much I wanted more time, more clarity, more distance from the weight of it all, I knew I was standing in the exact point where everything would change, and there was no stepping away from it. Now, the silence stretched longer than it should have, thick and unbearable, like the entire world had narrowed down to the space between my heartbeat and my next breath. And I realized something then that scared me more than anything Adrian had said. I was not just hesitating because of him. I was hesitating because a part of me was not ready to let go, not of the past, not of the version of myself that had loved him without question. My fingers twitched slightly in Michael's hand, and this time I felt it clearly, the warmth, the steadiness, the quiet certainty he had always given me. And I forced myself to focus on that, to anchor myself in something real, something present. "Michael," I said, my voice softer now, not breaking, but not strong either. And when I turned toward him fully, I saw it. Not anger, not fear, just understanding, the kind that made my chest ache in a completely different way. Because he had always been like this, patient, grounded, never forcing me into something I was not ready for. And suddenly that felt heavier than any pressure, because it meant the choice was entirely mine. No excuses, no deflection, just truth. "I need a second," I added, barely above a whisper. And for a moment, I thought he might resist, might pull me back into the version of the day we had planned. But he did not. He simply nodded, once, slow and steady, his hand loosening from mine without hesitation, without protest. And that small gesture hit harder than anything else, because it was trust, complete and unshaken, given to me in the middle of chaos. I turned back to Adrian, and for the first time since he walked in, I let myself really look at him. Not just the memory of him, not just the version I had held on to, but the person, standing in front of me now. And there were differences, subtle but real. The way he held himself, the way his expression carried something heavier, something earned, like he had lived through things I did not know about, like he had changed in ways I had not been there to see. And it made everything feel even more complicated, because this was not just about who we were, it was about who we had become. "If you had found me sooner," I said slowly, the words careful, deliberate, because they mattered more than anything I had said so far. "Would you have come back the same way?" Adrian did not answer immediately, but this time the silence did not feel empty. It felt thoughtful, like he was choosing honesty over ease. "No," he admitted finally, and there was no hesitation in it. "I would have come quietly, asked for a chance, not this." His gaze flickered briefly to the room around us, the guests, the ceremony frozen in place, then back to me. But I did not have that option. My chest tightened again, because that made sense, because it meant this was not about drama, not about making a scene. This was about timing, about the fact that life had not given him a clean moment, and he had taken the only one left. My mind spun with it, the weight of every possibility pressing in at once. "And what if I say no?" I asked, my voice steadier now, because I needed to know, needed to understand what this moment actually meant for him. Adrian held my gaze without flinching, without hesitation. "Then I walk away," he said simply, "and I do not come back again." Something in my chest cracked at that, not loud, not visible, but real, because this was it. There would be no second interruption, no future explanation, no another chance waiting somewhere down the line. Whatever I decided right now would be final, and the realization settled over me like something heavy and permanent. I inhaled slowly, trying to steady the chaos inside me, trying to find something clear in the middle of everything blurred, because for the first time since this started, I understood exactly what was at stake. Not just my wedding, not just my past, but the kind of life I was choosing to live, and whether I was brave enough to choose it honestly. I inhaled slowly, but it did nothing to steady the storm inside me, because the truth was already there, sitting just beneath the surface, waiting for me to stop pretending I did not feel it. My eyes drifted past Adrian for a brief second, taking in the room, the guests frozen in place, the soft glow of the lights, The aisle I had walked down just minutes ago, thinking I knew exactly where my life was headed. And suddenly it all felt distant, like something I had stepped into without fully understanding what I was leaving behind. I turned back to Michael, because I had to, because ignoring him would make this easier than it deserved to be. And he deserved more than that. He had always deserved more than half of me. You have always been good to me, I said quietly, my voice steady but heavy, and I saw the way his expression shifted, not surprised, not confused, just prepared, like some part of him had already known this moment might come. I know, he replied softly, and there was no bitterness in it, no anger, just honesty, and that made it worse, because it would have been easier if he had been anything less than what he was, easier if I could point to something broken and say that was why I could not stay. But there was nothing broken here, nothing wrong, just something missing, something I had tried to convince myself did not matter, but standing here now, it mattered more than anything. And you make everything feel safe? I continued, the word catching slightly in my throat, because it sounded right and wrong at the same time, like a truth that was not the whole truth. Michael nodded once, slow, like he understood exactly what I meant even before I finished saying it. But, he asked, and that single word cut through everything, because it opened the door to what I had been avoiding, what I had been afraid to admit even to myself. I swallowed, my gaze flickering briefly back to Adrian, who had not moved, who had not looked away, who was still standing there like this moment was everything. And maybe it was, but I never stopped wondering, I said, and the words felt heavier than anything else I had spoken today, because they were honest in a way I had avoided for too long. Michael exhaled quietly, not sharp, not angry, just accepting, and that somehow hurt more than if he had argued, because it meant he understood, it meant he saw the truth I had been trying to hide. About him, he said, not as a question, just a statement, and I nodded, because there was no point pretending anymore. Not here, not now, not when everything was already exposed. The silence that followed was different this time. Not tense, not uncertain, just full of something real, something that did not need to be explained. Michael's hand finally slipped completely from mine, not abruptly, not coldly, just a quiet release, like he was letting me go before I had to force it, and my chest tightened sharply at that, because it made everything final in a way words never could. You should go to him, he said, and I looked at him quickly, startled, because I had not expected that, had not expected him to be the one to say it out loud, to make the choice clearer than I had been able to on my own. I do not want you standing here wondering what if for the rest of your life, he added, his voice steady. Even now, even in this moment, he was thinking about me, about what I needed, about what I might regret. And it hit me then, clear and undeniable. This was love too, just a different kind. One that did not demand, did not hold on when it knew it should let go. My throat tightened, words catching somewhere between gratitude and something deeper, something harder to name. But there was no time to stay in it, no time to linger, because the moment was still moving, still waiting. I turned back to Adrian, my heart pounding harder now, louder, because the path in front of me was no longer blurred, no longer hidden behind doubt or confusion. It was clear, terrifyingly clear, and for the first time since this began, I took a step forward, not away from something, but toward it, toward the part of my life I had never fully closed, toward the answer I could not ignore anymore. The distance between us felt both impossibly small and overwhelmingly vast as I took that step, my heart pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. But the room stayed silent, suspended, like the entire world was waiting to see if I would follow through or stop halfway like I had done so many times before. Adrian did not move, not even an inch. He just watched me, his expression unreadable, but his eyes steady, like he was bracing himself for whatever came next, whether it broke him or not. And that alone told me everything I needed to know. This was not easy for him either. This was not some reckless decision made without consequence. This was something he had chosen knowing exactly what it might cost. I stopped just in front of him, close enough now that the space between us felt charged, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten, like stepping into something I had tried to forget, but never really could. You really would have walked away, I said quietly, not as an accusation, but as a realization, and Adrian nodded once, simple, certain. If that is what you wanted, he replied, and there was no hesitation in it, no attempt to sway me, no pressure, just truth, and that made it harder, because it meant this choice was not being forced, it was being given, and I had to be the one to take it or let it go. My breath came out slower this time, steadier, because for the first time since this moment began, I felt something shift inside me, not confusion, not panic, but clarity, quiet and undeniable. You should not have come like this, I said, my voice firm but not cold, because even now, even standing here, I could see the ripple effect of what this was doing, the people behind me. The ceremony paused, the life I had been about to step into now hanging in uncertainty. Adrian's gaze softened slightly, not defensive, not regretful, just understanding. I know, he said, but I would have regretted not coming more. And that honesty landed differently, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just real. And I realized something then, something simple but powerful. Regret was what had shaped so much of my life up until now. The regret of waiting, the regret of not knowing, the regret of building something new while still carrying something unfinished, and suddenly I knew I could not carry that into my future. No matter which path I chose, I needed to hear it. I admitted, more to myself than to him, because that was the truth I had been avoiding, not whether I still loved him, but whether I had ever truly understood why he left, and now that I did, or at least enough to see that it had not been as simple as I thought. The past no longer felt like a closed door. It felt like something I had walked away from without looking back properly. I glanced over my shoulder briefly, and there was Michael, still standing there, not distant, not withdrawn, just present, watching quietly, and the weight of that did not disappear. It settled differently, heavier but clearer, because this was not just about choosing one person over another. This was about choosing the life I could live honestly, the one I would not question every time things became quiet. Every time I wondered about the road I did not take, I turned back to Adrian, my heart. Steady now, not calm, but certain. If I walk away from this, I said slowly, each word deliberate, it is not going to be halfway. And his expression shifted slightly at that, something like hope flickering through, but he did not interrupt, did not assume. He just waited, and for the first time, I was not afraid of what came next. I was only aware that whatever I said would define everything after this moment, and that realization did not scare me anymore. It grounded me, because I finally understood that this was not about the past pulling me back. It was about whether I was ready to choose something real, even if it was uncertain, even if it meant starting over. And I took one final breath before I spoke, knowing there was no turning back after this. The words sat at the edge of my lips, heavy, inevitable. And for a moment, I just looked at him, really looked, not at the memory I had held on to, not at the version of him that had hurt me, but at the person standing here now, the one who had come back not with excuses, not with promises, but with truth. And something inside me settled, not completely, not perfectly, but enough to know I could not keep standing in between two lives pretending I could hold on to both. I loved you, I said, first, because that part deserved to be acknowledged. Deserved to exist out loud after everything we had been through. Adrian's expression flickered slightly, something soft breaking through the tension, but I did not stop there, because this was not just about the past, and I never really stopped. I added, my voice quieter now, but clearer than it had been all day, because it was the first time I had said it without hesitation, without trying to reshape it into something easier to carry. His breath caught, barely noticeable, but I saw it. I felt it. Because that connection had never fully disappeared, no matter how much time had passed, but I held up a hand slightly before anything else could be said, because this was not finished, not yet. But that is not enough, I continued, and that part hurt, because it was the truth that mattered just as much, maybe more. Love that disappears, love that leaves without answers. It changes things. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt, did not argue. He just listened. And I respected that more than anything else he could have done, because it meant he understood what this moment was, what it required. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the clarity I had found. You say you did not choose to leave, I said, and I believe you. The admission felt strange, unfamiliar, but right, because I could see it now. The gaps, the misunderstandings, the timing that had never lined up the way it should have. But I still Live through the part where you were gone. My voice softened there, not accusing, just honest. And I had to build something from that. I glanced briefly behind me again, not fully turning this time. Just enough to acknowledge the presence I could still feel, steady, patient, waiting, Michael, and the life I had almost stepped into, the one that had been real. Even if it was not the one I would choose. You came back, I said, turning fully to Adrian again. But you came back to a version of me that had already changed. His eyes searched mine, not panicked, not desperate, just trying to understand where I was going. And for a second, I saw the same question reflected there, the same uncertainty. Because even now, even with everything said, nothing about. This was simple. I took a step closer, closing the last bit of distance between us, not out of impulse, but out of intention, because this needed to be clear, needed to be real. If I choose you, I said slowly, each word deliberate. It is not because of what we were, his breath stilled, his entire focus narrowing onto me. It is because of what we could be now. And that was the difference. The line that separated memory from reality, past from future, regret from choice. So do not ask me if I still love you, I added quietly, because that question no longer mattered the way it used to. Ask me if I am willing to try again. The words settled between us, heavier than anything else I had said, because they were not just an answer, they were a condition, a boundary, a truth that could not be ignored. And for the first time since he walked in, I saw something shift in Adrian's expression, not relief, not certainty, but something deeper, something that matched what I felt, the understanding that this was not a return to something familiar. This was the beginning of something uncertain, something that would require more than just love to survive. And as the silence stretched again, waiting for his response, I realized that this moment was no longer about whether he had come back. It was about whether we were both ready to move forward. Adrian did not answer immediately, and for a second I thought maybe I had asked too much, maybe I had drawn a line he could not cross. But then I saw it, the shift in his expression, not hesitation, not fear, but something steadier, something grounded, like he had already made this decision long before he walked through those doors. I am not here for what we used to be, he said finally, his voice low but certain, and that mattered, more than any apology, more than any explanation, because it meant he understood, truly understood, that we could not go back, that whatever this was had to move forward or not exist at all. My chest tightened, but not painfully this time. Not like before, it felt different, like something aligning instead of breaking. I am here because I still choose you, he continued, and the simplicity of that hit harder than anything else he had said, because it was not dramatic, not overwhelming. It was just honest, and that was what I had needed all along. Not grand gestures, not perfect timing, just clarity, just someone willing to stand in front of me and say, I am choosing you. Even now, even when it is complicated, even when it is not easy, I exhaled slowly, the tension in my shoulders easing just slightly. Because for the first time since this started, I did not feel like I was being pulled in two directions. I felt like I was standing in one place, seeing things clearly. And you are ready for what that means? I asked, because I needed to be sure, needed to know that this was not just emotion, not just a reaction to seeing me again. Adrian nodded without hesitation. It means we start over, he said. Not pretending nothing happened, not skipping the hard parts, but actually building something that can last. His gaze held mine steadily. And I will stay this time. The words were simple, but they carried weight, because they were not promises wrapped in perfection, they were commitments grounded in reality. And that was something I could believe in, something I could stand on without feeling like it might disappear. My heart steadied. Not calm, not completely, but strong enough, clear enough, and I realized then that the fear I had been holding onto was not about choosing wrong. It was about choosing without understanding, and now I did understand, at least enough to know that whatever came next would be real, not something built on assumptions or silence. I glanced past him again, not fully turning, but enough to acknowledge the presence behind me one last time. Michael, still there, still watching, and the weight of that did not fade. It stayed, because this was not just about what I was choosing. It was also about what I was letting go of, and that mattered too. I turned back to Adrian, my decision settling fully into place, no longer shifting, no longer uncertain, Just there, solid, undeniable. Then we do not go back, I said quietly, and he nodded, understanding immediately. We moved forward, and for the first time, the words did not feel like a risk. They felt like something I was ready for, something I was choosing with open eyes instead of closed ones. The silence around us shifted again, no longer heavy, no longer waiting, but changing, like the moment had already moved into something new, something irreversible. And I knew there was one more thing I had to do before this could truly begin, one more step that would make this choice real, not just between me and Adrian, but in front of everyone who had witnessed this moment. And as I slowly turned, facing the life I had been about to step into, I understood that this was where everything truly changed. The room felt different now, not frozen, not suspended, but quietly shifting, like everyone could feel that something had already changed, and there was no going back to what this moment was supposed to be. I turned fully toward Michael, and for a second I just stood there, taking him in. The man who had been steady when everything else in my life felt uncertain. The one who had given me a version of love that was calm, consistent, and real in its own way. And my chest tightened because walking away from that was not easy. It would never be easy. I am sorry, I said softly, and the words carried more than just apology. They carried gratitude, respect, and something deeper that I could not fully put into language. Michael held my gaze, and there was no anger there, no resentment, just a quiet sadness that felt honest, that felt deserved, but also acceptance, the kind that does not try to hold on when it knows it should let go. Do not be, he replied gently, and that only made it harder, because he meant it, because he understood in a way that did not demand explanation. You are choosing honestly, he added, and I felt that settle in my chest, grounding me in the reality of what I was doing, not running, not escaping, but choosing, even if it hurt, even if it meant letting go of something good for something uncertain. I nodded slightly, because there was nothing else I could say that would make this easier, nothing that would undo the weight of this moment. But at least it was real, at least it was not built on something unspoken or unfinished. Michael stepped back then, just one small step, but it created space, clear and undeniable, and that was all it took. That simple movement marking the end of one path and the beginning of another. I turned back slowly, my heart steady now, not calm, but certain, and Adrian was still there, exactly where I had left him, not moving, not pushing, just waiting. And that mattered, that patience, that willingness to let me come to him instead of pulling me in. I took another step forward, closing the distance completely this time, and when I reached him, I did not hesitate, not anymore. We do this right, I said, quietly, meeting his eyes, and he nodded immediately, like he had been waiting for those exact words, like he understood that this was not a continuation of what we had before. This was something new, something that would only work if we built it differently, more honestly, more carefully. His hand lifted slightly, hesitating for just a fraction of a second, giving me the chance to step back if I wanted to, but I did not. I let my fingers brush against his, a small contact, but it felt significant, like the first real step into something unknown but chosen. The room behind us stirred softly, quiet murmurs, shifting energy, but it all felt distant now, like background noise to something more important, because this moment was not about them. It was about us, about what we were deciding to risk, to try, to rebuild. I exhaled slowly, feeling something settle inside me, not perfect, not complete, but real. And for the first time that day, I allowed myself to feel it fully, the weight of the choice, the uncertainty of what came next, but also the clarity of knowing I had not ignored it, had not buried it, had not walked into a future with questions I was too afraid to answer. And as Adrian's fingers closed gently around mine, steady and certain, I realized that whatever happened next, whether it was easy or difficult, whether it lasted or not, it would be something we faced together, not something left unfinished, and that was enough to take the first step forward.